This lecture is over the blood system and medical terminology. If you want to open up your textbooks to that chapter and follow along, that would be great. Looking at the introduction of the chapter, it says the primary function of our blood is to maintain that constant environment for the other living tissues of our bodies. Blood transports nutrients, things like gases and waste, to and from the cells of the body. Nutrients from food that are digested in our stomachs and our small intestines pass into the bloodstream through the lining of the cells from the small intestine. Blood then carries these nutrients throughout the body to all the body cells. Oxygen enters the body through the air sacs or the alveoli of the lungs. Red blood cells then transport that oxygen to cells throughout the body. Blood also helps remove the waste products released by the cells. It carries gaseous waste like carbon dioxide to the lungs so that we can exhale. It carries chemical waste like urea to the kidneys to be excreted out in the urine. Blood transports chemical messengers called hormones from their sites of secretion in the glands, like maybe our thyroid or maybe our pituitary gland, to distant sites where they regulate growth, reproduction, energy production. The hormones are discussed later in the endocrine chapter. Finally, blood contains proteins, white blood cells, antibodies that fight infections for us, platelets, and other proteins that help our blood to clot. It really does so much here. Those are, a couple of very packed paragraphs for us. We go into a lot of anatomy and physiology here with the composition and the formation of the blood, where, blood is started, and I really like the picture over on the next page. And you could see kind of the tan or yellow portion up at the top. Labeled over on the very left is the bone marrow. At the bone marrow level, inside the bones, is where we have those hematopoietic, it's a hard term for you to say that with me, hematopoietic stem cell, which then gets differentiated. Erythroblasts are made from that, megakaryoplasts, myeloblasts, monoblasts, and lymphoblasts. And in medical terminology, we're more concerned about the language, right? I'm not going to quiz you. You're not going to be tested over the different types of blood cells and what they do and what their specialty is, okay? That'll come in other courses that you take, human bio courses, anatomy and physiology type courses. But knowing that it all originates in our blood, bone marrow, and then you see it circulates in the bloodstream. The bottom half is a red portion or pink portion of that picture. It really is, showing the stages of the development there of the different types of cells and where we're at with that. It's a great picture. If you turn through, we really go through the different types here. They start with red blood cells, erythrocytes. Erythro means red. Then they go through leukocytes. Leuko means white, or our white blood cells. The platelets, okay, and then the plasma. And I want you to look at the last paragraph here on page 509, and that bold term, plasmapheresis. Okay, that's another hard kind of term for you to say. Plasmapheresis. Apheresis means removal. So it's the process. Plasmapheresis is the process of separating plasma from the cells and then removing plasma from the patient. In plasmapheresis, the entire blood sample is spun in a machine that we call a centrifuge. The plasma, being lighter in weight than the cells, moves to the top of the sample. It's almost yellowish clear, okay? And then you see, the blood cells or the red part of it, fall down. That would be a good, YouTube video if you want to research plasmapheresis and see that before they put the blood sample in the centrifuge and when it comes out, and the difference between those. Looking at blood types, and there's a nice little table there for us. Basically, we are looking at the Rh factor, so make sure you read through that paragraph and understand. And then out of all of that, I have written in my margin, universal blood type is type O. Okay, so for donations and donating, they often want universal. When we talk about blood clotting next, you've got some bold terms kind of speckled through these next few paragraphs. Really what you need to know is there's a sentence here that says platelet. It starts with platelets. about 1, 2, 3, 4 lines down here. Platelets are important in the beginning, okay, a process following injury to tissues or blood vessels. The platelets are like, I try to describe them as the first responders. The platelets are the first ones on the scene, okay? They become sticky. They collect and aggregate at the site of injury so that you can make a scab, right? Okay, and stop the bleeding. So platelets are talked about there. They're super important. Here's your vocabulary next, your yellow boxes, and then we get to our blue boxes. And there's not a ton, okay? There's a couple pages here. We have baso, meaning base, chromo for color, coagulo, cyto, eosino, okay, eosino, erythro, and make sure you watch that spelling. Granulo, hemo, hemato, hemoglobino, that one's great, uses the whole word, right? Iso, karyo means nucleus. That's kind of a funny one. You just have to make sure you use your flashcards a second and, you know, learn that from that. Leuco, mono, morpho. We have myelo for the bone marrow. Neutro, nucleo, phago, poiculo. Poiculo is one that has a really funny spelling. You got to make sure you pay attention to that one and really study that flashcard for yourself. Sidero, sphero, thrombo, and then a couple of suffixes here, and they go on to the next page. Apheresis, which we talked about just a little bit ago when we talked about plasmapheresis. We have a blast, and some of these are going to be repetition for you. Cytosis, emia, gen, globin, globulin, lytic or lytic, oid, osis, penia, phage or phage, philia, pheresis, poiesis, and stasis. And that's everything in your blue boxes. Now we get to the pathology and diseases. You'll see right away we go through the different types of anemias. Anemia is a condition. You've probably heard about it before. It states it's a deficiency in erythrocytes or hemoglobin. The most common type of anemia, it goes on to say, is iron deficiency anemia. It's caused by a lack of iron. It's required for most hemoglobin production, but there are other types. So we have aplastic anemia, which is good for you to review, hemolytic anemia, pernicious anemia, sickle cell anemia, and thalassemia. And if you look, there's a green square picture there with different blood cells. That shows the different types of the anemias and the different, issues with this actual cell. So that's kind of interesting to look at that picture too. So review those. Over on the next page where you see the word purpura, P-U-R-P-U-R-A, purpura. It says purpura is multiple pinpoint hemorrhages and accumulation of blood under the skin. There are some terms here that I want to make sure you understand. Hemorrhages into the skin and mucous membranes produce red-purple discoloration of the skin. Petechia, or petechiae, are tiny purple or red flat spots appearing on the skin as a result of hemorrhages. Ecchymoses, and watch the spelling there with the two C's, ecchymoses are larger blue or purplish patches on the skin. Ecchymoses is our medical term for a bruise. Okay, and petechiae are small pinpoint little discolorations. If you jump down and look at the pictures, you see bruising on the lady's face, but petechiae are just the little red spots, okay, sometimes that we see. So those are interesting, okay, to know those two terms as well. Really, the next big thing is when we get to lab tests and clinical procedures. I say almost every single one of these lab tests is important for you to understand. What's the difference between bleeding time and coagulation time? Okay. What's a SED rate, an erythrocyte sedimentation rate, or an ESR? What's the difference between a hematocrit and a white blood cell count? All of these are very different, and they're super important for you to be able to review and understand. And then we get to the very end of the chapter. Again, your yellow abbreviation boxes. I would say some of the most common abbreviations here that I would want my students to know is the CBC. Okay, if I need a CBC stat, that's a complete blood count. Okay, it's a blood test. Hematocrit and HCT and hemoglobin right underneath it. So a hematocrit, hemoglobin, hematocrit, or hematocrit, hemoglobin, HCT, and HGB. And then over to the RBC, or red blood cell count, I would say, are some of the most common abbreviations there. And then that's the end of the blood system. Again, you can do your practical applications and review. You can read the in-persons. There's 2 of them. Again, the exercises at the end of the chapter are all for you since you have the answers to them. Those are just review.